We're back to finish the Purim story with Peace and Understanding with Miss Fran. Okay, well, we have two side-by-side comparisons of what a picture might have looked like of Haman having to lead the horse around on which Mordecai got to ride. And this would be the king's horse. So here's Mordecai riding the king's horse. Here's Mordecai riding the king's horse. Everybody remember why Mordecai gets to wear the fine robes here and wear the king's horse and ride the king's horse. He doesn't get to... I don't think his robes in this one look that different, but in this one, they're a lot fancier than what you ordinarily see Mordecai wearing, which is this plain brown and orange thing. Haman doesn't have a change of clothes for this scene, but Mordecai does, that's for sure. Haman doesn't, Haman doesn't have a change of clothes. Mordecai doesn't have a change of clothes in this scene. But both pictures show the palace gate. Well, this one shows the palace gates as they might have looked, and this one shows the outside of the palace as it might have looked. So we have two different books about the same event, and we don't know how true either one is, but we're pretty sure we think something like this may have happened long, long ago. We have a song in Shushan, Shushan, Shushan long ago. It's fun to try to sing that fast because it's got the shush, 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 shush sound. Well, this is the Festival of Esther, which I read you a little of, but now we're picking up the story in this catchy rhyming scheme that is a Purim story by Linda Davis, illustrated by Y.E. Taub. And on the cover, do you remember who the people are? The happy people dancing are, in line from left to right, Queen Esther, there's King Ahasuerus, and there's Mordecai. And I think that might be one of those noisemakers that Jewish kids and sometimes grown-ups make noise with when they hear the name of this guy. Remember him? Haman. Boo. And you remember how he's wearing the triangular hat in this story, but not in this story. We're going to continue with this story. We're going to find out what happens after Ahasuerus gives Mordecai the chance to ride around on the king's horse, and Haman has to pull the horse, and everybody is talking about what's going on and this big event. Okay, another banquet scene. There's a lot of food. There's Haman. Let's zero in on Haman, which means put the camera closer. Well, he's looking kind of sly, but Ahasuerus is looking kind of surprised at something that Esther is telling him, and the story picks up from there. Then Esther was going to tell Ahasuerus. This was way back here. This was before meanwhile, the king, one night when the king could not sleep, he asked for the history books that kings keep and read about how Mordecai warned of a plot. Remember, back before that, Haman was doing the plot, and Queen Esther and Mordecai discussed what to do, and Esther was going to fast and then tell the king about it in 3 days. So now it's 3 days later. Okay, so this is the dress she's wearing 3 days ago. Now she has a change of clothes because she's a queen. And I guess Ahasuerus, the king, has a change of clothes. Haman is wearing his same military-looking uniform, but might have a change of outfit since he's such a high-ranking official. He might get to do some laundry or have some laundry done for him, more likely, now and then. I think Queen Esther's dress looks very beautiful, but again, I don't think it's the kind of thing that women would have worn, royal women would have worn way back then. I think they would have worn something more like this. So it helps you think critically to think about history and more about it. You can think, gee, is that what really happened? Then Esther made feasts 3 days later for Haman and the king. Ahasuerus was pleased and said most anything that she asked would be granted. So Esther's request was that her life be spared and the life of the rest of the Jews in the kingdom. The king was dismayed when he realized what terrible plans he'd okayed. Okay, as a reminder of what terrible plans he'd okayed, he okayed these plans that Haman was making to kill the Jews. And Haman's got this big sword on his desk, and then he's coming into, later on, he's coming into Ahasuerus's room to show him a picture of the gallows that he wants to use to hang Mordecai and the other Jews. So he's got lots of terrible killing things. I mean, well, goodness. Ahasuerus looks very surprised, and I don't think he looks happy. I don't know. I would say that he's breaking out in sweat. Those look like little drops of water. And Queen Esther, she doesn't look too, I think the corners of her mouth are going more down than up. I think she's worried. That's what I think, but maybe that's because I know the story. Well, and don't forget, did I mention, King Ahasuerus also didn't know until now that Esther is Jewish. And he loves Esther. He's in love with Esther. And, well, at least according to the story, not just he thinks she makes a good queen, but he really is in love with Esther. Wow. And now he's finding out that there's this plot against the Jews. So Queen Esther, she did, according to the story, she did the thing that was the right thing to do. She revealed her identity, even though that too could have cost her her life. Ahasuerus and wasn't supposed to know that she and Mordecai were Jewish, but they just couldn't hide it. When Haman asked Ahasuerus to bow down, remember that? And that started all the trouble. Well, the king, when Haman wanted Mordecai to bow down, and that started all the trouble. And Mordecai eventually got to wind up riding on the king's horse and getting rewarded by the king because he had done good deeds for the king. So the king is now just starting to realize all this stuff. Now, what's the king gonna be like? Will the king have learned his lesson? Don't feel prejudiced against people because they're, say, Jewish or anything else. Well, history tells many different stories about King Ahasuerus, because remember, he's also King Xerxes, the guy that invaded Greece, ancient Greece. Remember, I told you about Herodotus. So you might get some books about ancient Greece. You might find some at your library. That would be good for kids. Actually, any book that you find about Greece is bound to mention ancient Greece and the countries that tried to invade it and the way Greece fought back and eventually won the Persian Wars. And that was something that Ahasuerus Ahasuerus continued that after his dad started it back when his dad was king. But in this story, and in that story, he's Xerxes. In this story, he's got a different name, Ahasuerus. Sometimes, I guess in ancient times, the king might have more than one name, or maybe history would just record his name differently. So there are these two famous stories about Xerxes / Ahasuerus, and this is the Ahasuerus story with Queen Esther and boo, Haman. This is the story where maybe Xerxes / Ahasuerus will be a good guy. Let's find out. We have this historical interpretation, the book here. Ooh, wow, this looks scary. Haman doesn't look happy, and boy, these guys look really rough and tough. Ooh, enraged. The king left, but returned to the scene and thought he saw Haman attacking the queen, and that thus all Haman's schemes were disrupted that day as the royal guards grabbed him and dragged him away. Oh, look what's over there, that scary thing that Haman had in that picture he was showing Ahasuerus earlier, remember? They dragged him away to the very same gallows which he had constructed to hang Mordecai. Haman himself, was conducted. Okay, well, that gets very scary. I'm so glad that it doesn't show the picture of Haman getting hanged. What the next picture it shows is a happy picture, and all these Jewish people, they're happy. In fact, they've been saved from the gallows and Haman and his evil plot. And here is a picture in this book of Esther and the banquet she has for the king Ahasuerus and Haman. Ahasuerus, I think, gets another change of fancy clothes. There's her telling about the plot and Haman being surprised. She's pointing the accusing finger at Haman. Same thing as what happened in this one. Haman is just starting to... Haman doesn't know what hit him. In this one, Haman has a chance to say, oh, no, it wasn't me. And she, and you know what? You know how in this one, Ahasuerus also knows what Esther's saying is true? Well, he sees a gallows outside of the window. That's this thing. It's very far in the distance. You have to look closely. And who built that? He demanded. Haman built it to hang Mordecai, a servant answered. So, wow, if there must be the servant. So, I guess a servant has to tell the truth if he's asked. Or maybe the servant was supposed to speak. Maybe he spoke out of turn. I don't know. I'm guessing the servant was probably supposed to speak. People didn't often speak up like Queen Esther did when she knew that her people's lives were in danger. Remember this scary scene when Haman, I just said that Haman was making all the Jews scared and upset. Remember that? Okay, well, remember back in this one, the Purim story. Now all the Jews are saved. Let's see if we can find a picture of that same thing in the Festival of Esther. These are two different retellings of the same story. We don't know for sure what the ancient story was really like. In fact, we're not sure whether there was really a Queen Esther, but we think that there was somebody like her who had this kind of influence. Now in this story, it's a little more sophisticated, a little more of a story for kids that are a little more grown up. It says something else happened. There's some fighting before there got to be the happy part. Well, we'll read about that. But we're going to continue with the story that rhymes. And that is Purim Story by Linda Davis, illustrated by Y.E. Todd. We're going to stick with that. And there's that fancy outside of the palace and everybody standing outside to hear the proclamation. A lot of people couldn't read for themselves, so they had somebody who read important things to them. Hear ye, that kind of thing. Mordecai, Mordecai, said the king, you have my consent. Inform all your people they may defend themselves from their enemies. Could that be what's going on in this picture? If you read the page, it tells more about the fact that, yes, that is exactly what's going on. Your people, that they may defend themselves from their enemies. Here, take my ring. Then they'll know that these orders came straight from the king. Okay. And the king, realizing that no one was wiser, made Mordecai act as his royal advisor. On Adar the 13th, let the Jews take up swords, like in this picture in this other book, and kill all their foes, be they peasants or lords. In Shushan, the Jews received extra permission to fight on Adar the 14th in addition. What are they doing here? They're done. They must be done fighting. Soon it was over, the fighting all through. Haman's 10 evil sons were killed and hanged too. So this book also gets a bit serious. But with feasting and gladness, the Jews celebrated. Thus was the holiday Purim created. Ever since then, the 14th of Adar is a day of rejoicing for Jews near and far. In this picture and in this picture. Well, that's quite a happy thing, because the Jews had Queen Esther saved the Jews' lives, and she was a good person, at least according to the story. Now, there may be other stories. Maybe there are stories where Haman is portrayed as the good guy and they got it all wrong. I don't know. I don't think we have a lot of records of those stories, but there may be stories like that. If there are, you can read them. You can decide for yourself if any archaeologists or anybody ever unearthed any ancient shards of scrolls or anything like that. Maybe you'd like to be an archaeologist when you grow up. Archaeologists, they do special digging, not just any old digging where you throw dirt every which way. They look very carefully through layers and layers of things to find ancient, very old things that tell us how people used to live thousands of years ago. Maybe there are things yet to be discovered. We'll have to find out more about how they discovered things from ancient Greece, ancient Persia, even from ancient Rome, which is around the time, which is a later ancient time period, and it's the time period when a lot of the Christian stories like Christmas and Easter and St. Patrick's Day take place. Meanwhile, back to Purim, in ancient Persia. Ever since then, the 14th of Adar happens in our months of the months you're used to calling February or March, is a day of rejoicing for Jews near and far. But Adar the 15th is when Purim falls in Jerusalem, Shushan, and cities with walls. This is a city with a wall. It looks like a small city, but I don't know if Shushan, I don't know what's on the place where Shushan was said to be. I think we'd have to look at more maps for that. Of course, you can look on a map and find Jerusalem. To celebrate Purim, 4 mitzvos we do. The Megillah we read, or we hear, 2 times through. That's the story of Purim, but it's on a old scroll. I'll show you a picture of that in a little bit. And then we enjoy a great feast, and everyone sends tzedakah to the poor, gifts of food to our friends. Tzedakah is roughly translated a Hebrew word for charity, but it's not just charity, like, I don't know. It's different than the way you may have thought of charity before. And you can look up tzedakah, TZEDAKAH. You can type that into your favorite internet search engine, like Google or anything else. Look it up, and don't just stop at the first result, because it may be an advertisement. It may be somebody who doesn't really know much about it, but they've just heard about it. You can look on Google or Wikipedia, but just read it through. Take the time. And then you'll understand tzedakah is kind of a special kind of charity, and it's not just about feeling sorry for people. I think that it's got a lot more to do with putting yourself in the shoes of people who might be poor and imagining what it might be like and thinking that could have been me. I think it's kind of like that. And that, my dear children, is how this book ends. Okay, and there's one of those noisemakers, and there are 4 children there, and this is a modern guy, and everybody's in this picture is dressed in a more modern way than even Queen Esther with her 1800s dress. Short dresses, overalls, a little bit old-fashioned, but less so. The man and the older boy are wearing little hats called kippot or yarmulkes, and those are things that observant Jewish men and boys, I think over the age of bar mitzvah, over the age of 13, maybe not, this little boy's wearing one, and no, I guess all men and boys wear them to show that they're Jewish and keep their heads covered. It's just one of the religious customs. Okay, but I just thought it would be neat to do the first page, because if anybody's read The Cat, we'll just leave off with that. Now you know the story of Purim. I just wanted to read the first page, because if you've ever read the story of The Cat in the Hat, remember how it starts with the sun did not shine, it was too wet to play, so he sat in the house all that cold, cold, wet day, and then all these things happen. I think that this rainy day kind of reminds me of that. The kids are getting a little bored, a little bit like they've run out of stuff to do, and they're kind of pouting and not looking very happy. The children were restless. They scowled at the snow. They whined and they quarreled and wished it would go. It's been ever so long since we last built a sukkah, and it's almost a year till the next Hanukkah. All having to do with different Jewish holidays. Tu B'Shvat, it was hard to plant trees in the ice. Now, if Pesach came sooner, that would be nice. Well, remember after the kids in The Cat in the Hat sat and were complaining, they had an adventure with The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss. Remember that book? Very classic kids book. Well, these kids are going to have an adventure, but they're going to have an adventure reading the Purim scroll with Dad. See, here comes Dad, and he's saying, why don't you get your groggers? Purim is coming. Why don't you get your costumes and groggers? Because soon we'll fulfill a mitzvah when all of us hear the Megillah. We'll fulfill a mitzvah when all of us hear the Megillah. Fulfill a Megillah. Rhymes. Very clever. There's the Megillah scroll. I guess, yeah, Dad has the scroll right in the house. The traditional way to read it, that's what people had before they had books with the spines like this. Remember? And then he begins telling the story that we just read. So that is one retelling of the story of Purim. Now, I mentioned, and this is another picture of a Purim scroll. Okay, well, Purim actually is considered a minor Jewish holiday on the Jewish calendar. The next big Jewish holiday that's coming up is Passover. Now, this is an important Jewish holiday. We only eat this special bread called matzah. We don't eat any other kind of bread or cereal or any other kind of, no bagels, no cupcakes, no cakes, no brownies, no crackers, just this kind of matzah. Okay. And we drink either wine or grape juice, and there's a lot of symbolism, but Passover is a celebration of when Jews were enslaved even longer ago than the Purim story. And it is the story of how Moses, who Jews and Christians both hear a lot about, led the Jews from slavery to freedom. And it is something that the story of Moses and the Hebrews who escaped from slavery to freedom back over almost 3,000 years ago, around 3,000 years ago, a little more. Well, that inspired later day struggles for freedom. Like, remember, during Black History Month, I read to you about Harriet Tubman. So that is Passover. I think I'm just going to end by reading this very short board book that you can read with babies and toddlers, My First Passover by Tomie dePaola. It is the first night of Passover. Why is this night different from all other nights? On Passover, we have a special ceremony, which is a kind of celebration, but not always with so many carnivals and stuff like Purim. A ceremony called the Seder. During the Seder, we eat and sing songs. Do you notice that this guy has a pillow behind him on his chair? Why do you suppose that is? Could be because his back is really hurting, but don't just assume it's because his back is really hurting. That's an easy thing to assume, but maybe it's some other reason. And we eat and sing songs and light candles, and we have this special plate. So those are all things that a kid might ask about. There are special foods for the Seder, matzah, and this is the Jewish star called the Star of David. You see that also on the Seder plate. And the Seder plate has these special things, harosits, a shank bone, an egg, parsley, salt water, bitter herbs, and back to the harosits. Okay, well, the harosits and shank bone and bitter herbs that you might not be so familiar with, you can find out all about that by looking up Seder plate, as well as things that you might have heard about, like egg and parsley and salt water. You can find out why we have those on the Seder plate. They are very standard on the Seder plate, and a Seder is not considered complete without them. And a Seder is when everybody who wants to celebrate the story of how the Jews went from slavery to freedom, they sit down at the table, they tell the story of what happened all those thousands of years ago, slavery to freedom, and how that story has inspired many people around the world since. As have other things. Other struggles for freedom have inspired new struggles for freedom. The story of the civil rights movement and the way we sing "We Shall Overcome," that's inspired yet newer struggles for freedom. This is a good part of history that keeps repeating itself in the middle of all the bad parts. This is the Haggadah, the book we read at the Seder. It tells the story of Passover. It tells the story of going from slavery to freedom. See, the boy is wearing that special head covering called a yarmulke or a kippah that Jewish men and boys wear. The girl does not, and the mom in the Seder table does not, but sometimes when you go to synagogue, the women do cover their heads there. The youngest child asks the 4 questions about the meaning of the holiday. This is a special cup for Elijah the prophet. We celebrate Passover to remember when Moses led the Hebrew people out of slavery in Egypt. And now you see everybody's got their best clothes on, and there's one of that might be the youngest child, but I think he's the youngest one who's old enough to read the questions that the child asks about the 4 questions. See, you really have to be old enough to either read or just remember all of the 4 questions without either just memorizing them by heart or reading them. So he's probably the youngest child who's able to read the 4 questions, but soon it will be her turn, and then it'll be his turn. They're probably too little right now. And then it says, next year in Jerusalem. They hope to be in Jerusalem, that famous walled city. And it's got Hebrew letters, and that is not only a different language, but a different alphabet. It's read, this language with this alphabet, Hebrew, is read from right to left. You're used to reading things in English from left to right. Every culture, every place does things a little bit differently, and that is part of what makes the world go round, and that is a part of the freedom that we celebrate on holidays like Passover, the 4th of July, lots of, I guess Purim is also a holiday about freedom. Many other holidays from many other, sometimes Christians may consider their holidays a celebration of being free. Hindus, Muslims, same thing. Really, every country has a kind of Independence Day every country that I can think of. So everybody celebrates. There's a lot of celebrating freedom throughout the year. And it's freedom to not just do whatever you want, but freedom to act in a responsible way that is best for both you and for others. A lot to think about. Well, that's Passover, and that happens next month. And next month, of course, is also Easter. We'll read more about Easter and spring next month, and we might or might not read one more about Passover, but I think that's enough for Jewish holidays for right now. But it does tell, these holidays do tell a lot about what life was sometimes like thousands of years ago for people, everyday people, and people who might have been everyday people but sort of found themselves having to be brave, like Moses and like back here, Queen Esther. And they are just people from the Jewish faith. There are people from every land, every faith who have had to find themselves being brave. So we'll read more about people who found themselves having to be brave and do the right thing throughout the year.